Millions of Americans across the country who face substance abuse and mental illness are often stigmatized by society. What are some organizations doing in our community to provide unique programs for those seeking help? And what are those organizations doing to break down the barriers of stigma? I'm Brenda Kamal. This is Our Issues, Twin Cities. At the University of Minnesota, visiting a furry friend is one way to heal mental health issues.
Any student can drop in and visit with a dog, occasionally a cat, rabbits, a miniature horse.
Chief Medical Officer at Boynton Health Service, Dr. Gary Christensen, is the co-founder of Paws, a stress-reducing program through animal therapy.
We start a couple innovative programs. One is the Pet Away Worry and Stress, Paws program, where we bring animal-assisted interaction teams here to campus 2 to 3 times a week, which has been a big draw.
A new Boynton Health Service student survey at the University of Minnesota reveals the number of students diagnosed with a mental health condition has increased significantly since 2013.
Why have the number of students diagnosed gone up in the last couple of years?
Our survey asks whether you've been diagnosed. So that implies they've seen somebody, either a counselor or a psychiatrist or a primary care physician. So part of it is people actually getting to the resources and then getting the diagnosis. So that might actually be a good figure. Another thing is that there are more students that perhaps have been identified in high school struggling with, say, anxiety, depression, who are able to get help earlier and then be able to get into college that may not have historically so. So there are some positive trends there. On the negative side, it could be that stress is increasing, that there's more demands, either societal and other ways, that are leading to some of the reasons that individuals are having more stress or depression.
Is it surprising that more and more are being diagnosed with a mental health disorder?
There's another study called Healthy Minds Study that is not a University of Minnesota one, although we've participated before. That takes a little different approach. It actually asks about specific symptoms that are characteristic of, say, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and from that derives who probably would meet criteria if they actually came in. Those that are identified as probably having a mental health issue, less than 50% are actually in treatment, getting any help. Less than 50%. So we know there are people out there. And from their figure, about 35%, I believe, of students actually would meet criteria for having a significant mental health problem within the last year. So it's showing that this is a very prevalent issue with students on campuses today.
In fact, 1 in 3 students on the University of Minnesota campus have reported a mental health diagnosis.
We're living in a world that doesn't feel as safe as it may have at earlier times. And so sometimes that has an impact on student stress as well.
Dr. Glenn Hirsch is the Assistant Vice Provost in the University Office of Student Affairs.
Why does mental health continue to be the #1 public health issue on campus?
Well, what students are telling us is they are increasingly feeling a great deal of academic stress around doing well in a tight economy that doesn't necessarily have a lot of jobs. They're feeling a lot of competition about that. Students are also telling us that they are worried about finances, about paying for college, which, as we know, has become increasingly expensive.
And many of these stress factors leads to the most frequent reported health issues, depression and anxiety.
Depression and anxiety are pretty much even. Depression used to be the lead cause. Anxiety has become more either even or a little bit ahead of the game now as far as the most common. And when we talk about anxiety, we're talking usually about general anxiety, a tendency to be overly worried about multiple different issues and to have physical symptoms of such. The kinds of depression that we see, one is called major depression, and it's characterized by significant depression most days, and then a number of other symptoms that are characteristic of that as well. But there's other varieties as well, lesser depressions and different characteristics of them, but we're referring to that. For us, we actually then make a distinction between that anxiety and other kinds of anxiety, like social anxiety, panic attacks, and those things, obsessive compulsive disorder. But most of what we're talking about is generalized anxiety and different degrees of depression.
The rate of students reporting diagnoses of 2 or more mental health conditions is also up. Why do you think more and more students are coming forward and addressing these issues than they have in the past?
I think we have had some success in reducing stigma so that students are more willing to come forward and acknowledge that they are having a concern and seeking out appropriate services. Sure. That is not true for all students. We know that students of color, based on national surveys, are sometimes less likely to seek mental health services, and that's one of the big challenges that I think all of us have, is reaching out to the full, diverse group of students on our campus to offer services.
When we return,
they think someone would think less of them if they had a diagnosis of depression, anxiety, mental health disorder.
breaking down the barriers of stigma surrounding mental illness. Through the University of Minnesota's organization Active Minds, students work together to raise awareness and remove stigma surrounding mental health issues on campus.
And part of it is just about stigma and getting people to move past sort of the negative attitudes and the shame that surrounds mental health issues.
A junior at the University of Minnesota, Victoria is the president of Active Minds.
How are you using your role to raise awareness and remove stigma surrounding mental health issues here on campus?
There are a couple different things I do in my role that I think are really important to the campus environment surrounding mental health, and one of them is just our regular member meetings that we have every other week. And a big part of it is education. We'll focus on a different mental health issue or a different aspect of mental health and really make sure our members understand it and have better information, and I think that's really important to working on the environment. But also we have a really great network of students and staff and faculty here on campus who are concerned about mental health and improving that. And I've been working really hard to build more connections with other student groups and with our student government to make as much change as possible for students.
Although there are still attitudes in many societies today that foster stigma and discrimination towards people who suffer from mental health problems, many scholars are seeing a positive change in the way people view mental illness today.
And do you think as a society, are we becoming more comfortable with discussing mental health issues and reaching out for assistance?
I think there is some increasing comfort in openness about talking about mental health issues. It is covered so often in the media. We obviously have celebrities and other highly visible people who've become more open about talking about their mental health concerns, and I think that generally gives people more permission to feel like they can open up and talk about their own concerns.
How have the changing social attitudes about mental illness shifted the way we look at emotional health?
There's some interesting things about the attitude. So if you look at, for example, one study, national study, shows that if you ask students about whether they would think less of another student if they had a mental health diagnosis, the vast majority say no, they wouldn't think. But when they are asked right in the same area, in the same survey, whether they think someone would think less of them if they had a diagnosis of depression, anxiety, mental health disorder, most think that others would think less. So there's this dichotomy, this discrepancy between what people believe how they would treat others or think of others, but how others would think of them, which has still been a challenge for us in getting some people to care. However, overall, we think the dialogue has been improving, increasing. There's more open dialogue, and that open dialogue, which we're really trying to promote, is decreasing one of the barriers for people getting help.
Is it also because there's less stigma surrounding mental health issues today?
I think there is, definitely. The stigma still remains for some, but I think the younger generations are dropping that stigma more than historically has been the case.
And as more and more students come forward, the University of Minnesota offers various programs to tackle their mental health issues.
It has been reported that 1 in 3 students are unable to fully manage their stress levels. What services do you guys offer to help students manage their stress in a healthy manner?
The Office for Student Affairs offers a number of programs to help out with this. So our 2 clinics that offer mental health services offer training in stress management. We have classes in yoga, we have classes in nutrition, and we have this wonderful recreation center, the Recreation and Wellness Center, where students can go and work out and get and stay in good physical shape. And we know that there's a very strong connection between stress management, overall mental health, mood stability, and exercise.
We've started a student group called Distress, and they provide stress checkups where students are basically an inventory of kind of what's happening in their lives and some ideas of how they might be able to manage that. There are online courses that are available on stress reduction. We started a crisis line through Canvas Health or Crisis Connection specifically to the University of Minnesota, so there is someone that someone could call in a crisis and talk to at any time. We recently started a texting service through the same association, and so we piloted that with freshmen. We're now this semester going to broaden that to the whole student population. So if someone's in crisis or just needed some support, or so they could actually text and have a real conversation.
As important as these programs are in facing mental health issues, it's the University of Minnesota's acknowledgement that mental health illness is a real and serious problem affecting many students, setting the Twin Cities campus as a leading example in tackling this issue head-on.
How important is education and educating students in order to reduce the numbers of diagnoses in the future?
Education is important different ways, but I think part of it is that producing an active discussion about mental health, how it affects society, how it affects people, what are all the other consequences. The financial consequences of society are, for example, are huge. The effects on attendance in occupations is huge. Knowing these factors and the influence, I think, is important. I think also seeing the relative prevalence of these conditions speaks to me, at least, that this needs to be considered part of the overall academic experience. It has to be addressed, just like physical health is. We have a stenciled phrase on a wall down the second floor, which is from Herophilus of Chalcedon, who was the physician to Alexander the Great. And although I can't quote it word from word, the bottom line is if you don't have health as a foundation, then all the things that we're trying to achieve here, whether it be the arts, whether it's wealth, whether it's strength, whatever that might be, that you're just not going to be able to achieve those, or that they really won't be worth anything without that foundation of health. Right. And so I think it has to be central to any educational experience.
Education is really critical, both to let people know that these are common concerns and to let people know that there is help available and that it can be right here on the campus.
Up next on Our Issues Twin Cities.
There was a big epidemic going on when I first started with painkillers. That's what led me, at least, to heroin.
A clinic that specializes in mental illness and substance abuse treatment for East Africans.
It could be a struggle with them having a ride. Transportation might be a barrier. It could be a language issue, a language barrier. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the insurance might not be active, so helping the clients in a lot of different ways.
Seeking help for an addiction is stigmatized in many cultures, especially the East African culture. But at the Alliance Wellness Center, founder Yusuf Shafi is turning the tide by offering help to the East Africans in need.
Why do you think seeking help for addiction is so stigmatized in Eastern culture?
I think there's a lot of issues because people are not used to having alcohol and drugs back home, In fact, as a Muslim, you're not supposed to drink or use alcohol and drugs. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to understand that in a Western culture. And I think it's important for people to kind of educate themselves about those things, because we live in America now, things are changing, and it's hard for a lot of the generation, older people, to kind of understand what kids and youth are going through in America. So we just try to shed a light and educate folks about those kind of issues.
There was a big epidemic going on when I first started with painkillers. That's what led me, at least, to heroin.
Mehad, who is a first-generation Kenyan American, stumbled upon the Alliance Wellness Center through a friend.
How did that affect your life, especially being East African?
It really affected my life in a real negative way, because both culturally and, just personally, it's very frowned upon in my culture, and it just wasn't, my family didn't expect me to do anything like that, as well as my friends too. So it was an eye-opener.
Is there a need among the East African community for these services?
Absolutely, there's a huge need. I think we need to create awareness, and we have to talk about these issues, because they're not going to go away if we don't kind of talk about it. So it's really vital that we have to talk about these issues and educate folks about this.
Today, thousands of East Africans call Minnesota home after fleeing political persecution or civil war in their home countries. As their population continued to grow over the years, East Africans not only began to merge their culture, language, and faith in their very own communities in the Twin Cities, they also had to adapt to the values of the American culture, which can cause stress and anxiety, sometimes leading to substance abuse.
Do you see that need growing as East Africans become more assimilated in American culture?
Absolutely. I think that westernization and kind of assimilating is a real issue for a lot of people. There's a conflict between the two different cultures. You have the younger generation who are more Americanized and more westernized and kind of forgetting their roots, and we also have the older generation who are still trying to hold on to the language, the culture, the values of our culture. So I think that will be something that will be changing, and it's going to be a tough issue for going forward.
Because seeking help for addiction is so taboo and stigmatized, how are you empowering people to seek help?
I mean, I think the most important thing is, like I mentioned, is creating awareness and kind of meeting the clients where they're at. Because at the end of the day, this is life. So every client is different, every situation is different. It depends on the individual's treatment plan, and kind of seek them and meet them where they're at. I think at the end of the day is when you give people options, you give them different, meet them halfway, and personality is a big key component to this, because a lot of our people struggle with trust issues. So if the clients don't trust you, typically they won't share what's going on with them. So what we try to do here is just kind of being open with them and giving them options and sharing kind of the stuff that I went through as a teen, and hopefully we have usually we relate to it one way or another.
At the Alliance Wellness Center, Yusuf helps those struggling with an addiction find recovery through various programs.
We have a day program here that talks about groups, talk about relapse prevention, talks about some of the different ways to cope with mental health as far as using drugs and alcohol and how to stay sober. We have an evening program at the moment also that's helping people who are struggling with alcohol and drugs. We understand that people have jobs, and we try to meet the clients where they're at and meet them halfway and kind of help them what is good for them, what is the best service that we can afford for the clients.
How have the programs been helpful in combating addiction?
They've been very helpful. I'm learning tools to help me abstain my sobriety, and also with the group that I'm in, we share a lot, and we're like a family, since we're so close. But not only does that help us out, but there's things that you always learn and sometimes miss. And coming back here, I ended up learning things that I've missed from the past that is very beneficial to me right now.
Today, Mehad continues his path to an addiction-free life, but says he still has a lot to work on.
I still got a lot of time to make up for, and and this whole process takes time as well. So it's kind of tough, but I'm at a place where it's easier for me now than it was before. Much easier.
What advice can you give others who may be suffering from an addiction and come from a background where seeking help is looked down upon?
I would say to really, really be open-minded and really think deeply to yourself. Knowing what you want in life is very important, and the only person who would know that is yourself. So if you truthfully want to change, you know, you're the only one who can change yourself. So it's truly what you want. But there's always hope, and anyone can be in the same spot as you, or position, and change.
Thank you for joining me this week on Our Issues Twin Cities. I'm Rena Kamal. See you next time.